I just want to comment on House Bill 211, which is on the smelter. Just so you are aware, I teach econ, I teach finance, so those guys out there, so you are aware. The big power users in our region subsidize the power to the houses. So we are not paying the full cost of our power. So no matter what happens in this ball game, the power is going to go up, whether they stay or leave. We do not want them to leave because there's a secondary effect. It will affect the grocery stores, it will affect the restaurants, the hotels, the movie theaters, will all have a secondary effect in this community. We have to do what we can in this tough economic environment to make sure these jobs stay. It will help us in the long haul. I just want to say that up front. And I'm not trying to take your thunder or anything of that nature. Just want to make sure people are aware. It's like education. Everybody believes they're paying the full price of education. You only pay a third of the cost of education. The rest of the money comes from the federal government and the state government. People who pay their tuition. Listen, my family has 9 college degrees. I'm telling you point blank. We do not pay the full cost of education. We only pay a third of it. That's it. And then the rest comes from the federal government and state government. And I know, it's still you guys. I understand that. But when we pay our tuition, it's not all the cost of going to school. Just wanted to comment on a couple of items. We're going through redistricting. Hopefully on the House side, we have that. I think we got it all completed. So we got to get a bill together this coming week to send that out. But we got the Western Division of the state, the Central, the South, and the East have all got their redistricting plans in, and we have to put it in a bill. Pensions, we have a pension meeting on Monday at 2 o'clock, along with a smelter meeting at 2 o'clock, and I'm on both of those committees. So I got to figure out how I'm going to work that out. But we're going to talk about pensions on Monday. That is another difficult issue. We have to figure out where we're going to get the resources to fund the pensions. My mother, who's on a pension, calls me every week, and she said they're trying to take my pension money. I said, Mom, she's 85. I said, Mom, they're not going to take your pension money. My father was a policeman, so she lives on a policeman's pension. She said, they're trying to take my Social Security. I said, Mom, the government's not going to take your Social Security. I said, where are you getting this information from? She said, at 6 o'clock news. I said, Mom, stop listening to the 6 o'clock news. Exactly right. I said, you're 85 years old. They're not going to take your money. They're talking about the 25 and 30-year-olds where they're going to make adjustments. So just so you're aware, we are working on pensions. And I'm not making a joke about this, but I know it's very serious. And it's serious for us all. The ball game has changed for us. And where we get our money from and things of that nature has changed. And what we have to do is reshift what we're doing to make sure that everybody remains whole. Of course, we're going to talk about the smelters. The only bill that has passed in this session so far has been House Bill 7, where the universities are using their own money, no state money, are using their own money to build 11 buildings or renovate buildings. And it's the major universities, UK, U of L, Western, Murray, and the only 2 universities not going to take part in this is Eastern and Kentucky State, which are not going to renovate or build buildings and use their own money in the process. So just so you're aware that's coming. And we have to take a look at tax reform. I personally think there's going to be a special session because we cannot get done what we have to get done in this 30-day session. We have to tackle this pension, but it requires a 60% vote, which I don't think is going to happen on the House side. And if you go into a special session, it only requires a 51% vote, or 51 out of 100. And it's we're probably going to have to go to that to get the necessary legislation passed to make sure we move forward with this pension plan.
And obviously the smelter issue is the big issue that's consumed so much of our time. I know Representative Thompson, Representative Gooch, Senator Ridley, myself, Senator Rhoads. We've all struggled with this and have dedicated probably half the time that we spent in Frankfurt over the last couple of weeks dealing with this issue, and it is a huge issue. And it strikes me, and there is a lot of, I feel, misinformation out there that ratepayers are going to be over encumbered because of the smelters going to the open market. But the fact of the matter is, the smelters are going to pay a hefty line service fee to get to the open market. They're negotiating now any ancillary costs that might be involved. So really our position, to state it very simply, is that we really don't feel like other ratepayers are going to be over-encumbered with the smelter's capacity or ability to go to the open market. And what it's going to do is going to save some 1,400 direct jobs and thousands of indirect jobs. When times are good, government expands. When times are bad, we still have the government expansion, but it's a heavy load for us because we can't support all the programs that we put in place and all the services that were implemented when the economy was good and we expanded our government. So now we're faced with a crisis of a shrinking economy over the past few years, but we still have the expanded government. We have to deal with it. It's a society that we live in. And I can assure you that the society that we live in today is a complex society. If you don't think so, just come to Frankfort and see all the different demographics that are in our hallway lobbying for their cause. And they're all good causes. Folks don't come to Frankfort for bad causes. You don't see folks that aren't dedicated and well-intentioned in Frankfort. They all have a cause that they're fighting for. But it's a reflection of the complex society that we live in today. So we need jobs. We need jobs to support the society that we're all a part of in today's world. And I go back to this one comment, and I've used it over and over and over again, and I'll continue to use it. As I was listening to the State of the Union address, our president said we ought to wake up every morning and think about job creation. Well, what we've got now is about 1,400 good-paying jobs, and they've already been created. Do you know what the challenge would be if we had to go out there and recreate those jobs? To the governor's credit, he spends a lot of time going across the state celebrating new jobs. And these aren't a lot of jobs that he celebrates, but I don't blame him. I mean, if there's 50 jobs being announced in one part of the state, he goes and has a ceremony there recognizing that, we've created jobs in different pockets across the state. But these aren't big factories. These aren't big jobs that he's going and announcing. These are 50 new jobs, 25 new jobs, maybe 100 new jobs. We're talking about a lot of jobs here that are an important component of our community. And it strikes me that right here in Owensboro, we accepted a tax increase. Now, even if the ratepayers were going to be, the other ratepayers, other than smelters, were going to be encumbered in some small measure. If you think of what the impact of this, we've endured right here in this community a tax increase for riverfront development on our insurance, and for the most part, that's been accepted. We've got a nice riverfront. People have felt the impact of that, but we've moved on from it. But these jobs are critical. I mean, without it, we can't support, again, all the things that we're obligated to support.
I really do believe the most important issue that we face today at the Capitol is the Big River Century, and I have to include Alcamp because they are a corporate citizen in my district. Judge McCaslin, thank you very much for your opening comments because they are true, because there are two sides to every story, and we as legislators and you as a judge and those other judges that are here know that, mayors, there's always two sides to these stories. And, I think the issue that we have before us is the need for balance. We've got to have some balance to understand both sides of these issues. And fortunately, in my career as being a legislator, I have come to know what the issues are with smelters, and I've also had the opportunity to understand what goes on with big rivers. Some of you who are here today might say, well, Ridley, why aren't you signed on to Senate Bill 71? And with all due respect, I think from a political standpoint, I have tried to stay in that balance, being available to discuss both sides of the issue with those who are involved, and come up with a fair and balanced approach to compromise. Without compromise, I think there's no way we can continue to move forward. So that's been my situation. But I think I have to set the tone with that, with the statement that I'm stating that is a quote from a former member of the Kentucky Public Service Commission who was on it for years and has continued to watch the proceedings through the Public Service Commission. And he says this, and I quote, "Big Rivers and Century have a history of distrust." And we've got to get through that, ladies and gentlemen. The other thing that I see about this issue is it's not legislative in nature. It's a contractual issue. And if you want to see those $1,000 an hour attorneys have fun with this, you watch when this legislation passes and signed by the governor, and you'll really see a lot of things. But I've got to save those smelter jobs. That's my job. And that's what I'm trying to do. You know, Chairman Bowen, Leader Thompson, Chair Jim Gooch, and I were all part of a, 2 years ago, we came to the table and formed what we like to call the Smelter Caucus. But you know, we'd been knowing about the issues here for years and years and years prior to. But we really did come together and attempt to try to find a resolution to our situation here, because we must save those smelter jobs. Once they're gone, they're gone. This is not like Ford Motor Company or Toyota or General Motors, where there's a labor issue and a management issue, and they walk off the assembly line and left that half-constructed car sitting there. 2 weeks later, everybody gets back together, they come back to the assembly line, they finish the production of that car or truck. Okay, no big deal. But with these smelters, if the electricity goes off on those pot lines for, I don't know, 15 hours, I've been told, it's done. That whole situation is over with. Those jobs are gone. Pack it up, leave. That's the end result. So in this situation, it appears to me that there has to be negotiation. And you know, as those of us who are sitting here, I'm coming forward to tell you today that my fear is that from Big River's side of the equation, my fear is that their leadership is missing in action. The information that is shared with the 25 board members of those three are being filtered. I think that information is being filtered to them. And I question whether or not they are dealing with their fiduciary responsibility. And that's bold, and I have to say that. But I think at the end of the day, it's important we save these smelter jobs.
In regard to the pension, we did pass Senate Bill 2, the pension bill. It's a very complex subject. I can't speak for the House, but what I understand is that the feeling over on the House side is that if we pass a pension bill and we don't have any means or mechanism for funding the pension bill, then we may have thought that we're doing more than we're really doing, because this is going to require at least, by what we are hearing, at least $120 million from general fund revenue next year. So we've had a habit in the past of kind of kicking the can down the road. We've done it for years with the pension. We're going to have to come up with a funding plan. And for us to pass a pension bill and then just go home and say, we've done a pension bill, we're kidding ourselves. And we're kidding the public. So we really need, and I hope that the resolution is that we come up with some sort of plan to fund what we're doing. Because if we kick it into the budget session, we got a lot of issues to deal with in the budget session. And I personally feel that we're not going to either be able, with our optimistic 3% growth rate projection, I don't believe that we're going to either be able to grow our way out of this or to cut our way out of this. I think we're going to have some new revenue, and that brings on another subject of tax reform, and that's probably going to be for another day. As Chairman Bowen said, and I agree 100%, we've got more on our plate to deal with right now than we can probably handle. And nobody really anticipated the smelter issue, which is sort of really taking a lot of our time too. And nothing's more important. I agree with Senator Ridley on that. But we're going to have to face up to this. There are a lot of ideas that have been brought out by the tax reform task force that we're going to have to look at. And a lot of these, we have to take a balanced approach. A lot of these would help our business, would give us some corporate tax relief. But there's a lot of things I think that we can do that when our economy does grow, our revenues grow at the same time. And we haven't had that sort of tax structure in place. So we really do need to do this. Personally, don't think we're not going to be able to do this in regular session. It's been my experience in my 11 years in General Assembly that when we have a serious subject to deal with, we deal with it most effectively in a special session where we can focus on that particular subject and not have to deal with 600 or 700 bills that are floating around that take a lot of time, most of which will never see the light of day, most of which will not pass. So I think we're headed for at least one special session, perhaps on the pension. I'm not overly optimistic that we'll have a pension bill that comes out this session. I hope we do, but we've got differences of opinion in the Senate as to whether we should pass a pension bill and then determine later how we're going to finance it. And the House feels like we need to have this integrated. So I hope we have a pension bill, but I'm just not sure we will. If not, then we're going to have a special session on pension. We'll probably have to have a special session on tax reform and maybe a special session on redistricting. So we're going to get special sessioned out here. We're going to gag on special sessions, but really we've got to get these things done.
Also, in the House of Representatives, we passed House Bill 1, which is a bill that deals with our special taxing districts. Many of you all know about those. Do great work in our communities. Are served very admirably by a lot of people who volunteer. Commissioner Davis, a lot of their time. These are things like our library boards, our health departments, our fire departments, things of the like. This bill just simply provides a registry for them to provide more information to the public about their budgets, have more transparency. Adam Edlin told us some information I didn't know, but in the aggregate, all of those 1,300 some special districts we have in Kentucky expend about $2.7 billion of taxes that they collect. So, you know, it's big business, it's important business, provide a lot of great services to our community, but this transparency I think will be positive. Another bill that we passed is to increase the dropout age for high school students. We passed this about 4 times on our side. This bill would move the graduation rate up from 16 to 17 in 2017, and then to 18 in 2018. We have about 6,000 Kentucky students drop out of school every year, which is totally unacceptable. About 28 other states have passed this legislation. And I mentioned earlier today when we were talking on this subject that a recent survey showed that 85% of parents support raising the graduation rate, but we always know the role that a lot of them play sometimes in kids dropping out. So I hope we can do this because the bottom line, I think it can go a long way to making sure our kids are productive members of society as opposed to becoming dependent upon society without the skills to raise their children, advance a career, and have the wherewithal to be successful contributors to our society. So I hope we can reach some compromise on that. One other bill that I was particularly excited about was a bill that we passed that deals with Cole County scholarships. You all might remember that in the last session, Governor Beshear commissioned a group that would allow about 6 or 7 counties, coal-producing counties primarily in the east, to use their coal severance monies to provide scholarships to kids in those counties to go to colleges and universities within that region, which I think is a great idea, but we'd like to have the advantage of that in all coal-producing counties, of which we have 34, Davis and Ohio, certainly are 2 of those, along with many of the other counties that are in GRADD. So now we passed that bill that would allow coal severance monies, not general fund monies, but coal severance monies to be used to fund scholarships for kids that are going to 4-year public universities and colleges in those counties, and it could be as much as $6,000 per student. So
I thought that was a particularly good bill. Just quickly moving to the mega issues on pension tax reform and redistricting. Pension reform is something we certainly need to adopt. We need to do it. We have a crisis in our Kentucky employees' retirement system. A bipartisan commission, which has been talked about, came out with 3 principal recommendations. Fund 100% of the required contribution every year instead of the approximate 57% that we're funding now. Number 2, at least suspend, if not eliminate, COLAs, the cost of living adjustments, because we haven't pre-funded those and paid for them in advance, and they inexorably added to the unfunded liabilities that we have. And number 3, adopt for new hires, and I emphasize new hires, a hybrid cash balance plan that would have some shared risk, kind of be a combination of a defined benefit and defined contribution plan. The Senate passed that along those lines. I certainly support that. But Senator Rhoads said what we've got to do is have a funding mechanism to implement those changes. Otherwise, it would be, and a lot of our mayors here understand what the word of an unfunded mandate is. I think if we pass pension reform in structure only with no funding source, it's an unfunded mandate, and it really doesn't do anything. It's kind of meaningless. So we've got to find a funding source of new revenue, because the state doesn't have the revenues presently, nor will new growth provide sufficient revenues to fund and to meet the requirements of the pension system.
I'm on the Health and Welfare Committee. I am a physician. And I will say this, I have introduced a bill that would raise the cigarette tax by 50 cents. Now, the good thing about that is it might help keep some of our young people from start smoking. As far as reducing the actual amount of money it would produce about $126 million. That tells you how many people smoking. $126 million. That would help to go a long way for funding our pension reform that the Senate's passed. Now, but also it would help the health. It would help the health of our state, which we are one of the poorest health states in the country. We need it. I'm on the Human Resource subcommittee that studies this Medicaid problem. And you know, I'm a physician, and I believe in managed care, and I believe in everyone having a medical home. The only problem of it is there are probably not enough providers to provide all those medical homes. So we're going to have to get a little bit smarter, and we're going to have to start widening the choices. In other words, we're going to be using more nurse practitioners, more physician assistants. We're going to have to. It's not a can we, we've got to do it. That's one of the things that we have to do. We are working on trying to address this major problem that we have with our providers of the MCOs. In other words, we're basically, the state's giving them money, but there's a disconnect between the time they give the money to the providers that are providing actually the services. And, you know, we listen to both of the sides, and each side says it's the other side's fault. Well, the truth of the matter is it's somewhere in between, I'm sure, and we've got to sit down and get this resolved, because this is a major problem, and it's threatening to put a lot of our small pharmacies out of business. It's threatening our hospitals to some degree. And so this is a problem that we are continuing to work on. You know, one of the great things would be for this community, and also for Owensboro and Henderson both, would be for us to get I-69. And there are some bills to kind of help along this line, and we're going to continue to work in that direction. I happened to be down in Bowling Green about the time I-65 came along, and at that time Bowling Green was smaller than Henderson and just a little old sleepy town. Well, if you go to Bowling Green now, you don't find a little old sleepy town anymore, do you? You find a very vibrant town. In fact, it's outgrown Owensboro, and it's continued to grow. And a lot of that fact is because of I-65, because of the economic stimulus that it does. So I-69 would really be a big boom for Western Kentucky, and I think we need to continue to work on that. They mentioned the bill about special districts, and I think that is important. We need to know where that $2.7 billion, not million, billion, $2.7 billion is going. I don't think that there's any necessary misuse of that, but I just think that when you pay that money in, it would be nice to know where it's going and that it is going for what it's intended for. And that's what this bill does that we passed, I think House Bill 1.
Most of the issues that's really on the forefront here has kind of been addressed. One thing I do want to mention, someone mentioned earlier that industrial hemp was an issue that to allow industrial hemp growth in Kentucky. That passed, it was Senate Bill 50. It passed out of the Senate with a 31 to 6 vote. Let me just say that you may not know this, but somewhere after the Civil War in the late 1800s, probably about 80% of the paper in the United States was made from hemp. And you know, I chair the Natural Resources and Environment Committee, and you know, trees actually gobble up this carbon dioxide that we're all exhaling, and we're all you know, just so much talk about carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and global warming and all those things. And you know, I really think it might be an environmental issue to start raising hemp, because it probably would save a lot of trees if we use it for paper and other things. You know, I'm hopeful that when we look at all the things that industrial hemp might be, we could use it in a lot of the panels in our automobiles and side panels and dashboards and those sort of things. So there's lots of usage, and it's products that maybe right now they're buying from other countries. So I think it's something we should look at. One of the problems with looking at that is that it looks a whole lot like marijuana. It's probably kind of in the same family, and law enforcement has been very reluctant to come on board with us growing industrial hemp. And I think they're afraid maybe that they can't identify the industrial hemp from the marijuana. Well, let me tell you this: if you give people, and you control it, and you give people permits, and they have an acre or 2 acres or 5 acres of industrial hemp out there, you know, you're going to be able to distinguish that that's a cash crop and that's not somebody growing an illegal crop. Somebody said, well, you might be able to put a little marijuana and mix in with it. Well, with cross-pollination, you can't do that, because the industrial hemp would ruin the effects that people buy marijuana for a reason, and the hemp eliminates those effects or whatever that drug would do. And so I think that those are some of the things that we probably need to look at. I think it really is an issue. It's one of the things that we need to talk about a little bit too is, you know, we started growing corn in this country for ethanol, and I think this year the corn crop, 40% of the corn crop will go to ethanol. And I think that it is a legitimate concern in a world when people are starving to death. How much food is it okay to turn into fuel? And I think it's an issue that we need to address in this country. And you know, I'm not opposed to. I really think that we can help our farmers by letting them use industrial crops for energy. I think that's a good thing. But when you take an acre of, say, corn out of production and use it for something else, or out of food and use it for energy, then what happens is it drives up the cost of a lot of our other foods, because chickens and cows and a lot of other agricultural livestock, you know, pretty much eats corn and to grow. So those are some things that we need to look at. So what I think is that we need to do, instead of taking necessarily an acre of ground, like an acre of corn, out of the food crop, we might find some other things like possibly look at industrial hemp and see if it could be used for ethanol. And if we can find a crop that we can double crop, which means have two crops in a year, or we can find some crop that grows on land that normally wouldn't be used for corn. And that's the thing about industrial hemp. It doesn't take the great farmland necessarily that we have here that we're using for corn and soybeans. And so it's something that I think we need to really look at and really need to consider. I think, unfortunately, I'm afraid that we may let partisanship get in the way this time. Commissioner Agriculture Commissioner Jamie Comer has proposed that, and I'm afraid that some members of the House may not want that to happen just because of partisan reasons. So I hope that doesn't happen. I hope we let industrial hemp come out and really have a good discussion on it, because I think there's great possibilities there.